Good morning,
Good
King's Cathedral.
morning.
Welcome to today's roundtable discussion. I am Johnny DeRay. Here is my lovely wife, Ramy DeRay. Today we have an amazing discussion. We believe it's on time and it's
hmm
something important that needs to be talked about.
Right, and we're going to be continuing our conversation in regards to Black History Month. As many of you are aware, February is Black History Month. Um, and yeah, so I'm excited.
Yes, same here. We're going to be talking with an expert in his field. So we highly encourage that you grab a pen, a pad, replay today's discussion. There's also going to be a second part to today's discussion as well that
hmm
you can catch later on this week.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about the importance of anti-racist teaching.
hmm
So if you can just bring in our guest today, Minister Ray, we're going to have Kashmeel McKoena join us on today's topic. He's going to be able to share his wealth of knowledge. Hey, Cash, how's it
Hey,
going?
Cash.
Hey, Ramy. Hey, John. Thanks for having me. Happy Black History Month. How are you doing?
Pretty
We're
good. How about
good.
yourself?
Doing well, thanks. I've got my Black History Month shirt on. I'm
I
ready to
see
go. I'm
that.
really excited for this opportunity.
I see that.
Nice.
That's awesome. I see that. That's great. Great. So in preparing for today's discussion, we came up with a list of questions that we wanted to
hmm
really dive in and ask you about because I believe this topic is really important. And
Well, I think before we get there, Cash, can you do a little introduction? Like, you don't have to say where you work, but just in the field
mm,
that you're in.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a high school teacher. I'm very excited and proud to be teaching 11th grade this year. And I'm certified as an English teacher, but I kind of teach a lot of different subjects right now. So I am a local high school teacher here in the great city of Providence.
All right, thanks. Just so people have a little background of,
Right. We,
yeah.
we don't just got Cassius up here talking.
Right.
He has
Definitely.
nothing to do with this field. But so good catch, good catch. Um, so yeah, Cash, we're gonna dive in and start asking you some questions. Hopefully you're okay with that. Well, you're on, so you don't have much of a
Absolutely.
choice. But
Right.
so I want to ask, as a black educator, what do you think is important to address about race and Black history in your classroom?
That's a great question, John. And I think for me, I just don't think that we can afford not to anymore. We're living in
Mm.
a society right now where we are seeing people making life altering decisions for people who don't look like them. And it's, largely rooted a lot of these decisions in either selfishness or ignorance. And I think the classroom is the right place to respond to that. And I'm not just talking about the horrific killings of Black people by police officers, though I am absolutely including that. But it also extends to home ownership and the employees and executives and businesses not reflecting the diversity of our country. I think Minister
Mm.
Ray talked really eloquently about that last
He
week
did, he did.
Yeah.
in the roundtable. And we didn't get here overnight. This is a systemic issue. When we see things like this, when we see racial inequities at every level of our community and our society, it's a systemic thing. And that
Yeah.
means it's going to take a lot of time for us to figure this out. And I think we have to start early and we have to start powerfully. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of starting these discussions in high school.
Right.
Mm.
That's so good.
That's good.
Right. No, you definitely have to be intentional about this
Right.
stuff. It's
I
not
mean, I would say it should even start earlier than
yeah,
high school, but
true.
you are a high school
Absolutely.
teacher, so you're doing what you can um, with the role that you have now. So who is this? Well, that kind of answered that question. Who is this for? What kind of students? I mean, I would say all students, but Cash, you can go.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ramy. It's for all students. And I like to think of it as really two groups that have interactions with this. Those are students who have these lived experiences, students who are Black, students who are students of color, and white students who do not have these same experiences. I think it's important for both types of students because you have certain schools where there are no Black students. And, why do they need to learn about Black history? I think that's because we live in a society really where, it is possible because of the way redlining is set up and the way communities are segregated, for you not to have any experiences with people of color or with Black people other than what you see in the media or in the news. It's the way for a lot of this country. And I think that when you only see Black people represented a certain way in media, it kind of distorts your view of Black people and, how essential they are to this country, how essential we are to the fabric and makeup of this country. And it allows people to perpetuate those same segregations and injustices where there aren't, if you grow up not seeing Black people, then when you're the executive at your company, you may not hire Black people. You may have it look the way that your life has been throughout, since you were a child. And so because of that, I think education in the classroom is a great place for us to start learning about the contributions of other people in our society, to really see the multicultural history and reality of our country. And then going on to Black and Brown students who have lived experiences, I think it's important for our children to learn their history because we really want them to see themselves as more than what they see in media. I think about when I first saw Barack Obama on television. Up to that point, I'd been learning about American presidents, and I'm Canadian, so I can't really aspire to be a president. But I was looking at someone else's history. I was looking at someone else's job that I couldn't see myself in. Right. But when I see, living Black history like President Obama is, or Kamala Harris, right, thinking about Black and Asian women, suddenly, I can see myself in those positions. I can see myself in those roles. So now my mind is opening up to the opportunities that I have, and the things that I can study. And that's what education is for, is to open doors. So I think that's why it's important for both groups of students.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Guys. So why is Black history important for high school students? I'm thinking when I was in high school, there was so much going on. There's sports, extracurricular activities, that programs that you're involved in. So why is this important for high school students?
That's a great question. Going back to your own high school experiences, what did you learn about Black history? What were you taught? And you don't have to answer that right now. I don't want to put you on the spot, but for most people, I think we really only think about two things, or we're only taught two things. Lincoln freed the slaves, and Dr. King had a dream, right? And
so true.
And those are really amazing realities of, the emancipation of enslaved people and the civil rights movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King. But we're so much more than that. And I think when Black history is resisted, right, when we think about all these other priorities, sports, the sciences, all of these other priorities come up, we end up sweeping Black history under a rug. Because when you look at it, there are a lot of really ugly realities, right? Slavery didn't end, the end of slavery did not end racism. And, Dr. King's dream, as powerful as it was and as powerful a movement as that was, that doesn't explain why we still have the need for a Black Lives Matter movement today. And so it's actually really scary. I was looking this up this month. There are even schools in our country where parents can opt out of having their children learn about Black history in school.
Wow.
Right? And if you think about that, that just shows that when we think about history, when we think about at least what's required education in our country, we're thinking about the contributions of white Americans or European history, which, has important roots for us that we need to learn about. But we're hiding the scarier stuff. We're hiding the ways that Black people were treated, the ways that Asian Americans were treated, right? We hide those things because it doesn't fit our image of America being the home of the free and the brave and the land of liberty and freedom. Like, how can you talk about freedom when you've enslaved people as like the the main source of income in this country, or the main source of the economy? It's scary to face, but when we can face those scary realities, we can also see all of the beauty of the leaders and the influencers who have really changed America and made America what it is today. So I think we gotta like embrace all of it, the ugly truth and the beautiful truth. We gotta bring it together, because we won't fix what we're seeing in our society if we continue to ignore it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think bringing it to light is only gonna help heal it, right? And make so we don't repeat history and do it again.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think if we, the saying goes that those who do not learn their history are doomed to repeat it. I think we're seeing that right now.
Exactly.
So we better learn this time.
Right.
So Cash, who would you say is responsible for teaching these students?
That is a great question, Raimi, and I'm going to say this as a Black male educator. It is not just my responsibility.
Good answer.
I really think and truly believe it's the responsibility for all educators. And I think that there are opportunities for us to be anti-racist in every classroom. Or if you're a parent teaching your students at home or homeschooling, especially in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic, I think it's your responsibility too. And I said anti-racist, and you mentioned, John, earlier that this is about anti-racist teaching. To be anti-racist is different from being not racist. Like being not racist means that you can ignore race or just not mention it. And, why do we need to mention the Black race when we're talking about like algebra? That's the idea of being not racist. But the problem with that is, again, you could be ignoring the issues that your students are facing right in front of you, or that your students will see in their communities. It's, sweeping it under the rug and disregarding the real experiences of the students that may be before you, or the communities where your students are going to be impacting. So I think being anti-racist in your education means acknowledging the historic contributions and exclusions of different races in whatever subject you're teaching. And that might be easy for me thinking about like English and history. In the English classroom, that means we don't all have to read Macbeth and Pride and Prejudice every year. We can look at the contributions of other writers who look like our students, who look like me. And that also plays into history, like we just talked about. But how does this play into, like, for a science teacher? What do they do? I would encourage science teachers to look at scientists and talk about scientists like George Washington Carver, some of us know about, the chemist Herbert Smitherman, Dr. Smitherman, who invented a variety of products that we use today, including some laundry detergents and toothpastes. There's also a Black woman that I think science teachers should talk about, Dr. Kizimika Corbett, who is actually the Black woman who was behind the coronavirus vaccine that's currently being rolled out around the country. We talked about that. I heard a little bit in your conversation a few weeks ago about the vaccine. And as far as the sciences, well, those are the sciences, thinking about math, I think it's also important to highlight the role of Black mathematicians in creating a lot of what we're studying today and the ways that they solve problems. Jose Vilson is an educator who I follow who does a lot to highlight the different contributions of Black mathematicians. And it kind of goes back to that whole thing about Obama and Harris, right? If we don't see ourselves in those positions, like if I'm a student in a science class and I don't see Black scientists, I'm not going to think I could be one, right? I'm not going to think that I can ace this math test if I don't see anyone in my family who's being successful at it, or in my classroom who's being successful at it. So if we can see images of success for Black and brown people, then our students can then believe that they can become it. And I think that's so important in those fields like science and math, because face it, Black people are underrepresented in those fields. And so if we want them to be encouraged in those fields, we have to show them that it's possible. Right. You know, just like how they're seen in, just how we see ourselves in music, we see ourselves in sports, right? In many Black athletes, we got to see ourselves in these other areas too, so that these other opportunities open up. And so that's why I think it's important for every educator to talk about Black history and anti-racist teaching.
Yeah, so this is all so good, but I think we have to wrap up because of time. But if anyone wants to contact Cash and have more conversations about this, his information will be posted to get in contact with him. And we hope that you guys will tune in for part 2 coming up sometime this week. So look out for that.
So stick around.
I should say real quickly, my name that you can see at the bottom of the screen, it looks like it's misspelled. It's not. It's actually my pen name. So if you email me or visit my website there, I will definitely respond to you. It's not a typo.
Thank you for pointing that out, Cash. So yes, Cash, stick around. We're going to ask you some more questions because this is an important topic. And we believe it's a topic that needs to be talked about, not just for Black History Month, but throughout the year.
Right.
So yeah, stick around, especially if you are a teacher. In some way, shape, or form, stick around to listen, or if you cannot listen, replay the second part. So yes, we're going to send this over to the next portion of our service. So we hope you enjoy today's message later on. Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of today's discussion. On the round table, we have none other than Kashmeel McKoena. Here to discuss with us about the importance of anti-racist teaching. So Cash, in part 1, you talked about the role, whose role it is to teach students and the importance of teaching Black history. So we want to ask you some more questions, and because again, this is an important topic, and we want to dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say before we?
No, I'm just excited to get into it. I didn't want to end the part 1 discussion, but I'm excited to be back for part 2.
Right,
so.
absolutely.
Me too.
All right, Cash. So here we go. Question 1 that I have for you is: what about the teacher who doesn't feel ready or prepared to teach this type of topic?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because I remember in the last section we talked about, I mentioned that this is the responsibility of all teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so many of us as teachers do not have this understanding ourselves. And I first want to say that I respect and understand that. You know, we as teachers, also parents and mentors, we can be very well educated and very well trained to teach our subjects, but never really be taught about race. Like, that's the reason we're in this situation that we're in right now, because people have not learned. And that's what we're trying to break down. So I have a few resources that I'm going to list off real quickly, but for all of the viewers here, if you're interested, I'm going to just name a bunch of resources. If you want more details about them after this interview, you can contact me, and I'm sure my contact info will be on the screen later. But the first thing I would recommend is some sort of reading to help you to change your mindset and kind of see the realities of race in our country. A few books that I would recommend: How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. So you want to talk about race? There's a book by Ijeoma Oluo. There's a book by Layla F. Saad called Me and White Supremacy, which, you know, we don't have enough time to talk about white supremacy here, but know that that is part of the systemic part of racism that we talked about, that we want to change in education. There's also a book by Tiffany Jewell called This Book is Anti-Racist. And I have a book here, Stamped from the Beginning, which was really helpful for me as a Black person to kind of understand the history of race relations in our country and really like why we are in the place that we're at. And this is by Ibram X. Kendi as well. If you're a visual learner, which I sometimes am, you may want to watch something. The documentary 13 by Ava DuVernay, who also made the movie Selma, I think is a really great resource. It taught me a lot about the history of how we see each other and how race has influenced that, especially when it comes to policing and incarceration and just like the media portrayals of Black people. When They See Us is another great documentary. I Am Not Your Negro. And then I would also recommend like infuse some joy and some hope into what you're learning about to see the whole picture of Black America and the whole picture of race relations in America. And that would be something like Becoming, which is a book and a documentary by Michelle Obama, our former First Lady. If you're also not feeling prepared to like have these conversations with students, like after you've prepared yourself with that material, how do you talk to students about it? There are books by Jason Reynolds, Nick Stone, Lamar Giles, Bibi Zaboy. Again, all of these names, you can contact me for more info. But there's a version of Stamped from the Beginning for teenagers called Stamped, and that's by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. That's what I'm teaching. And it's just an easier way for me to talk about these things with my students so that we're both on the same page and it's kind of meant for them. And the reason I'm suggesting books and movies instead of just talking to someone is because I don't recommend, like if you're feeling unprepared, your best move is not to just ask your Black friend to tell you about their experience. That can be intensely triggering if it's someone who is not volunteering their experiences to you, right? These writers and these documentarians who are making these movies and these books are volunteering their experiences to help other people learn and become prepared to have these conversations. But not everyone is at that place. I myself am someone who is willing to volunteer my own experiences and share more. And so you can see later on my website will be on the screen. That's another place where you can see some of my own experiences and contact me if that's helpful.
Good. That's so helpful because I know the part one of today's discussion, you mentioned, some people may have been brought up in an environment where they haven't seen these type of things or they haven't been taught this topic, and so knowing these type of resources are available is encouraging and it's really, really beneficial.
Definitely. Cash, you mentioned you're going through that book with your students. So is that what anti-racist education looks like on the basis of it? Or what more educational things do you bring to your students when teaching anti-racist education?
Yeah, no, that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, Remy. So this is the book that I am working with my students right now. We're breaking this book up into different sections and themes based on historic events, really to learn about not just the history of racism, but the history of anti-racism and anti-racist ideas so that we can get a sense as to where we are now. And the nice thing I like about this book, it says on the back, this is not a history book. Jason Reynolds writes in a way that's like very conversational, very like, entertaining, about very real things. And he talks about not only the difficulties, but also the highlights and some of those wonderful things where we see Black joy, where we see Black success and progress and leaders making actual change alongside white folks and other folks of color. So I highly recommend this as a place to get started and having the conversation. It can be read alongside a history book, like a standard U.S. history book, but ideally, it could also replace it as well. I mean, it shows a lot that is complementary and fits in that part of history that's swept under the rug. But I think it needs to go beyond this. It not only beyond it in terms of like looking at the successes and the challenges, but now going beyond the book and thinking about our communities, right? think about how there are inequities in our communities when you look outside of your classroom. Having your students think critically about that and do research about their community and volunteer in their community. To look at their families and the histories of how they've played into this race story of America. And as they're starting to think about graduating and moving on to next steps, I know I have 11th graders. We're thinking about that a lot right now.
Right.
Think about like what colleges your students are interested in and looking at their diversity and equity. And are they really trying to create a new America where multiculturalism is encouraged and where their experiences as Black people are going to be supported, or where they can learn more about Black people and work alongside Black students if they hadn't had that opportunity before. I think anti-racism education can start in a book, but it shouldn't stop there because it helps us to see everything else like a lens, helps us to see everything else with a lens of equity and inclusion.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So Cash, I know you in part one you kind of touched on how in some schools parents can opt their kids out of learning when it comes to Black History Month. So how do you navigate through that? Like if you had a student that didn't want to participate in Black History Month per their parents, or probably wouldn't. Well, I guess it might happen in high school.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super important and super relevant. And I think that a lot of the time what happens is there's this fear that develops. Sometimes it looks like anger, but I think most of the time it's fear. Fear from not knowing. Like there are some people who are like very aggressive about believing that racism doesn't exist or that it doesn't need to be a priority in education. And, you know, we can't convince everyone about that, unfortunately, but I think most people who don't engage in this or who are resistant to engaging are not those types of people. I think most people who do not engage just simply don't know. And you don't, you know, there's a fear that comes when your child is learning something that, you know, you can't have a dialogue with them about. You can't help them learn and you can't like monitor what they're learning. So what I would encourage educators to do is if you have parents who are resistant to this, invite them in, you know, tell them about the book, create space for them, maybe encourage them to start a parent book group of their own, so they can read it alongside their students. And that way it's not like the school is, you know, filling my child with all of these ideas about race that I don't understand. Like we should all be moving toward anti-racism in our learning, whether we're in students or adults. And, you know, it won't solve everything, but I think that, you know, if we don't talk, if we don't listen, if we don't share stories, then that fear will continue to keep people from engaging. So I would encourage, you know, bring your parents and community members into the discussion as well.
I like that.
That's a great point.
Yeah, no, I like the whole invite them in. You know, we shouldn't shy away from the topic, so bring them into the discussion as well.
Right, and it can be educational for them as well, like a learning point. You know, and that can create conversation between parent and student. You know,
correct. So that's a good point, Cash. So I'm going to ask this last question, so we can wrap it up. How does your identity as a believer connect you to what you teach, and also relate you to identity as a Black believer as well?
Yeah, I think one of the scariest things, my identity as a believer is super important to me. And I think one of the scary things about learning about this, right? Like I talked earlier about how this is like a scary thing, and that's why people don't talk about it. The scary part for me was realizing that the people who spread Christianity were people who used their faith to justify enslaving Black people or holding racist ideas. The very first racist idea that was used to justify slavery was that Black people from Africa who were Muslim, they needed to be enslaved so that they could be assimilated into Christianity. And so Christianity came with this racist idea to a lot of people.
Right.
And it's it's not just there, but it also is in like this, white standard of purity and character that you can see all the way in, like, you walk into some churches and all you see is, pictures of white Jesus, right? And we know that, like, historically he was Middle Eastern. He doesn't, have blue eyes and long flowing hair.
Right.
But, the thing I had to do was I had to separate the poor character of the people who carried Christianity from the rich and loving and just character of my God, who is the cornerstone of my faith, right? The people may not have done well with sharing all that God is as being loving and being just, but I can look at the scriptures myself and be loving and just. And I think that from that place of being loving and accepting and striving for justice, right? I think that's the place where I teach from as an anti-racist educator, because ultimately this is what God wants, not what people had shared before to justify their own intentions, but he wants us to love justice, seek mercy, and walk humbly with our God. That's from scripture. And a couple books or resources that I have to help me disentangle those two things with the way Christianity is being used and the way that God wants us to live are Oneness Embraced by Dr. Tony Evans and The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby. And my contact information is down here on the screen so that viewers can contact me if they want those resources or anything else that I talked about today. But I really appreciate that question.
Definitely.
Thank you. So good.
Have any questions?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Cash, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us and all the viewers.
Yes, definitely. Yes, again, thank you, Cash, for joining us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Again, everyone watching, please feel free to reach out to Kashmeel. He'll be more than happy to share some of these resources with you. And for those watching, please stay tuned for more discussions. Tune in to our Facebook page and also follow us. And see you Sunday as well to see what our next discussion will be. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you, Cash, for joining. Yeah. And my wife, thank you as well. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, John Naremi. Take care, everyone.